Hey, it's Ben Spees. It's a sad thing. You have nothing better to do than to listen to me on Soupkast.
Welcome to the surface of Superbike Planet.
The SuperbikePlanet.com podcast, Soupkast, is brought to you by American Honda.
Hello and welcome to the sixth in a series of podcasts on SuperbikePlanet.com, a broadcast we call simply Soupkast. This broadcast was recorded and released into the wild on July 14th, 2006. This Soupkast contains a feature on recent Utah Superbike race winner Jake Zemke, commentary on fans' expectation and reaction to the new motorcycle program Super Bikes on Speed, and also a mini preview of next week's United States Grand Prix at Laguna Seca Raceway in Monterey, California. Many competitive athletes don't like each other. Racers fall directly into that description, and just like hockey players who despise their competition, most of the racers I know don't send their rivals, much less their teammates, Christmas cards. There's something in the competitive makeup of these men that makes it impossible for most of them to be on genuinely friendly terms with the guys they have to grid up against. Winning in motor racing usually requires an effort on the edge of disaster, whether the performance looks like it or not. And it's got to be difficult for some to get completely motivated to beat another rider, especially if you're planning to have dinner with him later. Throw in that modern racing allows for a rare mix of people and personalities, and it makes for an even more motivation for them not to like each other. Case in point, Wayne Rainey and Fred Merkle were teamed together at Honda in the mid-1980s. Merkle won 3 Superbike championships while at Honda in this period. Rainey just one. While they put a pretty face on their relationship for the cameras, Rainey flat out said several times that he hated Merkle, although I've never been able to discern whether that stemmed from their childhood dirt track racing days, or that Merkle just seemed to be a lot luckier than Wayne on a Superbike in the 80s, or because of Merkle's close friendship with Rainey's arch-rival Kevin Schwantz. Merkle loved to irk Rainey, and if winning the title one season when Rainey had won more races than Merkle didn't do enough damage to their relationship, then the next year when Merkle would park his rental car next to Wayne's at the races and then shoe polish a large number 1 on the car just so Rainey'd know who owned the title when he walked by, probably did. Perhaps the strongest rivalry in U.S. Superbike at this time exists between Matt Mladen and Miguel Duhamel. This is a schism that has endured for years, and like most long-term relationships, it has flowed and ebbed over time. With the pair ready to start trading punches at several points, their mechanics used to stand between them to keep them separated, but has now notched back to more of a tone like that of an idling chainsaw. I saw them shake hands at Daytona, and Mladen mentioned Duhamel favorably in his recent column on SuperbikePlanet.com. At their rivalry's high point, or low point, there's little doubt in my mind that both Duhamel and Mladen hated one another. This isn't a one-hit wonder with these two, though. Duhamel has had several other fairly entertaining and venomous rivalries in his career, with riders such as Scott Russell, Doug Chandler, John Kosinski, and even slightly obscure riders such as Alan Carter and Miguel's 92 GP teammate Neil McKenzie. Mladen, as well, has not just centered his laser glare on Duhamel solely when it comes to rivalry. He and Anthony Gobert shared a love-hate relationship which dates back to when they were childhood neighbors in Australia. And Matt's one-time focus on Ben Bostrom is certainly one for the ages. Many times these men use the rivalry they so passionately stoke as a motivating force. They don't want to be defeated by anyone, much less the person they hate the most in the world. I assume that possibly the most painful thing some riders can do is give a congratulatory shake of the hand to his rival after he's finished behind him. There was a time when Terry Vance, himself a former racer and the head of the old Vance & Hines Suzuki/Yamaha/Ducati squad, would simply dismiss prospective riders off the list for his team if he thought they were too nice. He felt that an abrasive and well-founded nastiness and the accompanying will to win was required of anyone who wanted to win races. Looking at the history of superbike racing in America and the men who have dominated, it's hard to argue with Vance, as usual. But what of the guys who don't use rivals as a motivating force? Riders without a strong rivalry coursing through their veins. How does racing work for them? Honda Superbike rider Jake Zemke is one of those riders. Well-liked and with an infectious smile, Zemke has always been one of the friendliest and least threatening riders in the series. At the semi-recent Utah Superbike race, I had a chance to chat with Zemke on the subject of what he uses for motivation in racing and how he actually approaches racing. Our conversation happened after the first race at Utah, one in which Jake was bumped hard by Matt Mladen and then later crashed. So if he was ever going to be in a bad mood, one could assume this was it. I asked him about his motivation in racing and noted he doesn't seem to get too worked up about it and become nasty if he gets beaten or crash, as he just had done.
It's the way I've always been, and it's funny because when I was a kid and we had a little track in our backyard, just a little dirt track, tiny. I mean, on an XR100, I think it was second gear, might have been third gear at the best. But when I was a kid, I'd come home after school and just do lap after lap after lap after lap out there, and it was funny if anything ever happened and I was mad, or my dad would come out and watch me and give me pointers, and if I got mad at him or something, it just never worked out for me. I always end up going slower if I'm mad. I'm usually best when I'm just calm and at ease and joking around with the guys and having a good time, and that's usually when everything comes together, is when you're having the most amount of fun, for me. And that's one thing about racing in general. It's everybody's got to figure out what works for them, and that's why there's no set manual for training. There's no set manual for getting ready for a race. There's no set manual for anything for racing, because everybody's different and they have to figure out what works for them. And for me, I just be myself, and I go out and ride, and when it's time to go, it's time to go. And I don't know. It's just the way I am, I guess.
And in closing, we should mention that while Fred Merkel seemed to be more of a protagonist in the Merkel and Rainey rivalry, Merkel was not an innocent in this regard at all. When he left America to race the then new WSBK World Championship in the late 80s, he had a strong rivalry with nearly every other rider in the championship. Merkel even had the immortal words, "If you want blood, you've got it," painted on the back of his helmet, leaving no doubt to his attitude on the subject. As a lifelong television viewer, I am as much an expert on the medium as any other American who watches his share of moving pictures for leisure, education, or entertainment. The advent of cable television being piped into American homes has had an interesting effect on racing, because, truth be told, when racing is filmed correctly and with passion, it's almost better than being there. Almost. Motorcycle programming has gone mainstream, again, with both Jesse James, who is a closet fan of the late New Zealand engineering genius John Britton, and the Orange County Chopper folks sewing themselves into the fabric of mainstream pop culture with their television shows. I was present when Speed Vision was announced and have been a viewer for years, so it's been interesting to me to watch motorcycle programming sort of slide down the scale of importance at Speed, to a degree anyway. Motorcycle racing they support very well, and it's a popular opinion that the television coverage that the AMA series receives on Speed actually is better than the series is, or that it gets better coverage than it deserves. Regardless, Speed does an excellent job in all their motorcycle race programming. Greg White's show is no longer on Speed and has been replaced by a new program called Super Bikes, 2 words. While some might find it hard to believe, I did lament when White's show, commonly referred to as Greg's Garage, went dark on Speed. Looking at the programming currently on Speed, post Greg's Garage, I could not see one spot beyond Dave Despain's show, Wind Tunnel, where a motorcycle racer could be seen on a non-race program on Speed, and I find that disturbing and scary. Having been there for Speed's first days, when it wasn't uncommon to see a different racer featured on Bike Week or Motorcyclist TV every week. I'm not eager to see racers being featured on other Speed programming going the way of the Dodo or the boat or aviation programming on that network. I had a great deal of trepidation about the program Super Bikes, 2 words, before I watched it, because I'd heard it was a program that featured lots of semi-irresponsible street bike stunts and the like, and honestly the feedback that I'd heard from people who had seen it wasn't that great. More on that later. I wasn't that disappointed in my viewing of the recent episode of Super Bikes, honestly. The stunt riding wasn't that bad, and the host, I didn't catch his name, is clearly a very enthusiastic and non-pretentious man who is curious about the different facets of the sport of motorcycling. The stunt riding on that show will be the Achilles heel in terms of Super Bikes getting manufacturer support. I seriously doubt Honda or Yamaha will support a show that features people riding motorcycles like that. And I didn't see any OEM advertisers on the episode that I watched beyond Suzuki. In the big picture, I'm sure that Speed is at the bare minimum ambivalent about creating a show that is going to receive both motorcycle manufacturer support and feature responsible motorcycle riding. They just don't care. Speed had to sit by and watch the Discovery Channel, and others enjoy breakout mainstream hits with Jesse James and those true craftsmen at Orange County Choppers. And those are popular shows. Last year at Daytona, Evan Williams and I drove to the track early on Saturday in order to prepare for the day's racing, and noticed that the Orange County Chopper guys had a booth set up near the speedway. It was a medium-sized trailer selling OCC trinkets, and also an awning where the OCC craftsmen could sit and sign autographs. At 7:30 in the morning, the line was over a block long, easily twice the length of the line to get into the speedway at that hour. Okay, easily 10 times as long as the one leading into the speedway at that hour. Speed seems to be looking for a breakout mainstream motorcycle hit show, and I assume they're going to keep making laps until they find one. I assume that their newest show might not be politically correct or apt to gain favor with the manufacturers is a moot point for them, I'm sure. However, the fact that some of the early negative reports about Speed's new show, Superbikes, also came with a tone of surprise and bewilderment, this I found quite encouraging. Television today is an amazingly bad media source, where the networks by and large are pitching giant forkfuls of manure and throwing it against the wall to see what sticks. Not all of it is terrible, but great big bunches of it, certainly. TV's a place barely hanging on to the last shred of human dignity in some cases. I now wonder how low they can continue to stoop, because it just seems as if they have finally ground this medium down to the bottom layer. Case in point, just a few weeks ago I watched my 12-year-old son flick through the channels on our TV, and he didn't even stop at the flash image of a pretty girl eating what appeared to be a plate of large earthworms on one of those I dare you to do this shows. Not even a second look. So, the fact that in 2006 American television viewers are sort of shocked when a show replacing another show on TV is actually worse than the original, to me, reveals unbridled optimism. I'm so happy to see this. We're about a week away from the USGP at Laguna Seca, and we'll offer this as sort of a preview. In short, it's going to be interesting. Being that Laguna Seca underwent the steam shovel in the off-season yet again, and Doug Chandler notwithstanding, exactly zero of the AMA or MotoGP establishment have tested there with the new configuration, although it's largely the same as last year. One can only wonder what will develop once the racers hit the track in each class. Will the MotoGP riders like the current configuration any better than the one they hated last year? Will there be adequate practice time for the AMA classes this year? Can Nick Hayden dominate once again? All those and thousands of other questions will be answered by Sunday night of next week. If you're looking for a trend or something to hang your hat on in advance of the race, in terms of what to expect, well, it certainly looked to us anyway that Valentino Rossi had come to terms with the track as the race laps ran down last year. And some people are of the opinion that he gifted Colin Edwards with second place in order to please the American crowd. But in 06, we'd be surprised if Rossi, injured or not, isn't on the gas from the first session. Are you looking for a dark horse or a sentimental favorite? Maybe Kenny Roberts Jr. on the Roberts Honda? His seems to be one of the few RC211Vs which are handling as well as the competition. And what of the crowd? One can only wonder at this date if the semi-extreme new parking regs as set forth by Laguna will actually be needed. Last year, USGP tickets were a hot commodity in the days prior to the event, and fairly large sums of money were being exchanged for the right pass or paddock pass. eBay, without a doubt, saw some sales on the keyword USGP last year. This year, seems like there's lots of ads trying to sell passes at face value. And here we are, a little over a week before the event, and there's still rooms available in Monterey, although at what cost is unknown. Okay, all these and many more issues will be hashed out next week when Soupkast comes to you with multiple podcasts from the USGP. You are subscribed in iTunes, right? That will wrap this Soupkast up. Thanks for listening.
Soupkast is brought to you by American Honda.